Know what to eat, but find yourself not eating it. Perhaps you've been on diets and off again and just wonder why you can't stick to them. The Eating For You podcast, hosted by me, Sally-Anne Pisk, will show you what's been missing so you can enjoy a healthier way of eating that lasts. Hi, Sally-Anne here, and welcome to the Eating For You podcast. If you haven't joined in before, I'm a dietitian with over 30 years of experience, and I help women get out of the dieting cycle by setting up a healthier way of eating they can maintain without a diet or the scales. So today's special episode is to celebrate International Women's Day, March 8th, and it's the 40th anniversary this year. And our theme, women's rights are human rights. And we're taking the tact that it's your body and your choice. So in this episode today, we're exploring 5 common barriers that women may face in accessing appropriate health care for themselves. But we're not just going to focus on the barriers. I'm going to be providing some solutions as well. We don't all have equal opportunities to invest in our health and well-being, but we're not all the same. It's not essential that we all eat the same, we all do the same things. But if we keep in mind the research from the Blue Zones communities around the world and other research, then spending time with our friends and our loved ones and doing something that's good for us, such as walking in a forest, can be a wonderful opportunity to boost our well-being and our physical health. If you don't have a forest near you, you may have a garden or a beach. The first barrier is probably not a surprise to you. That's looking at the cultural and societal expectations of women. And women really do have this pressure on them to look a certain way. And in episode 118 of the Eating For You podcast, I talked about the impact of body image on women and men's health and well-being. So body image can really impact the choices that we end up making. I just also want to remind you that we don't all come with the same body type. Some of us are tall and thin or petite and thin. That's our natural body type. And in Ayurveda, that's referred to as a Vata type. Some of us naturally, form muscle easily and are more muscular in our build. And in Ayurveda, that's referred to as Pitta. And then for another group of us, we naturally carry more body fat. We might be more curvaceous. So we all come in different shapes and sizes, and it's being empowered to look after your unique shape. And that's what Eating For You is all about. I also want you to reflect on these pressures that you are under. And again, I do explore these in full depth in episode 118, because you have an opportunity to break free from some of the pressure that you're putting yourself under for how you look, how you're supposed to do things, or how much you're supposed to do in 24 hours as well. So the power of mindfulness and mindful eating is to help you focus on how you feel in your body rather than how you look. And certainly, if you want to explore this more on a personal level, reach out to me and book a 30-minute mindful eating strategy call. And I'm going to be providing the link to my calendar with this episode's notes. An area of today's episode that I did research quite extensively was this concept of gender bias and misinformation around women's health. And international research shows that women make up over 50% of the population, but will wait longer than men for a diagnosis and to receive relief for pain. They are also more likely to be misdiagnosed or discharged before their condition has stabilised. As an example, women may present with different symptoms of a heart attack compared to men. For men, it's usually tightness in the chest or chest pain. But for women, there's quite a list of symptoms: anxiety, shortness of breath, nausea, vomiting, upset stomach. There can be pain from the neck, the shoulder, down through the arm. And there can be an unusual level of tiredness or weakness. So symptoms are quite different. Another condition that's specific to women is endometriosis, and that can take, on average, 4.4 years to diagnose. Endometriosis is a condition where the cells of the lining of the uterus start growing in other areas of the body, usually around the outside of the uterus and the ovaries, and it can be quite debilitating. This is a condition that I explored with Sharon Hoffman in episode 107. So if that's of interest to you, please pop back and have a listen to that episode. Australia's healthcare workforce is predominantly female. 74% was the figure in 2022. Although healthcare practitioners with higher levels of income tend to be men. That may not affect your healthcare, but I do worry sometimes that it does affect the health of our healthcare workers. In 2022, 88% of the nursing and midwifery workforce were women, and 45% were medical practitioners. Roles underrepresented by women include general practitioners, where 48% are female, periodontists, 37% female, and specialists, 36% female. When we actually look at the number of positions or full-time equivalent positions filled by women, we see that there are 184 full-time equivalents per 100,000 in our population, compared to men filling medical roles at 257 per that 100,000 of our population. If we take a snapshot looking at whether our healthcare system is supporting women or men to a more or better level of care, it is a little bit hard to tease that out, because just because you saw a doctor or didn't see a doctor doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't need to see a doctor if you didn't visit them. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare in 2022 reported that the type of illnesses experienced by men and women were different, and that probably won't surprise you. At that time, 58% of women were living with ill health and 11% were living with 3 or more chronic health conditions, whereas for men, 46% were living with ill health and 6.8% were living with 3 or more of those chronic lifestyle conditions. The types of conditions that men and women experience differ, and I'm not going to go into that today, but certainly this information is available on the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare website, and I'll leave a link to that website in this episode's notes. When it comes to actually accessing healthcare services, 88% of women saw a GP, and that equated to 4.1 services per person. In that same period, 79% of men saw a GP, equating to 3.3 services per person. But as I mentioned earlier, that doesn't necessarily reflect who needed to access healthcare. That's who actually saw the GP. I think it's also important to consider how easy it is to access healthcare services, whether you live in a metropolitan or rural area. And a research report commissioned by the National Rural Health Alliance back in June 2023 showed that 7 million people, which is nearly a third of Australians, experienced a greater burden from illness and early death because they lived in a rural area. They had less access to healthcare services and less funding. It was estimated that rural areas are missing out on about $6.5 billion of funding each year, which equates to $850 per person. So whilst I don't have any gender-specific information there, if you're a woman living in a rural area and especially on low income, which we're going to touch on soon, then your chance of accessing the most appropriate healthcare services for you could be quite difficult. Now, the thing that probably concerns me the most with my research into this area is that women are still very much underrepresented in our medical research. And historically, the research focused on men, and these findings were generalised to women. And part of the reason for this was that there were concerns that the research may impact a woman's fertility or harm a pregnancy. But today, women still remain underrepresented in research. And one particular area of concern is heart health. And some studies report that research studies only show representation of around 30% of women. However, if it is a condition that women are more vulnerable to, such as hypertension and stroke, then they're well represented. So moving through the research can be a little bit tricky to find out whether both men and women have been adequately represented. The other issue is that many research studies don't even report on gender-specific outcomes, and that could be because their studies weren't large enough to allow them to break down the difference between male and female, because the more participants you have in a research study, the more costly it becomes. There's also a lack of identification of sex of animals used in research and cells that are used for research as well. Often the sex is not reported in the research paper. And when it has been, it has indicated that 70% of the cells used in research are male. America, Canada, and a number of European countries now have research policies in place to ensure that there's appropriate representation of genders in research. Australia is somewhat behind in this policy development. In 2017, only 2 of 10 research organisations surveyed had gender reporting policies in place. And the NHMRC, which is our National Health and Medical Research Council, is leading the way with this. Unfortunately, nutrition studies have suffered the same fate. And from a metabolic health perspective, so here I'm talking about weight management, diabetes, cardio health, there is a difference between men and women. And it is believed that it's due to our sex hormones, our X chromosome dosage, which really just refers to the fact that men have 1 X chromosome, whereas women have 2. And also the gut microbiome. More gender-specific research is required, but there is some evidence to show that the traditional Mediterranean style of eating confers different benefits to men and women. And that's the same for plant-based eating and vegetarian styles of eating as well. I'm not suggesting that we ignore the research, but become more inquisitive as to whether the research is relevant to us or not. And just by asking the question, has this been tested, whether it's a drug or a dietary pattern, has this been tested in men or women, and what were the outcomes? Mindful eating is one way that you can actually start testing what's right for you. And if you would ever like to find out more about mindful eating and whether it can help you improve your health and well-being, then join me in a free 30-minute mindful eating strategy call. And we can look at your particular requirements, what you've tried and what you're trying to achieve. And if I can help you, I'll put a plan together for you. If not, I'll do my best to refer you to someone who can. So following on from this, what I really encourage you to do is ask questions of your healthcare practitioners. Ask the practical things like the duration, the cost, the side effects. As I also mentioned, whether that particular therapy or treatment that's been recommended has been tested in men and women. Also, seek advice from trusted healthcare practitioners. Someone like myself has university qualifications. I am accredited to stay up to date in my field of practice. I specialise in women's health. So if you're seeking support from someone on a one-on-one basis or even a program, just make sure you check their qualifications. And I'm going to share more about this very soon. The next barrier I want to dive into is the influence of marketing and diet culture. And one of the reasons why I'm totally against the whole diet and wellness industry is that they offer generalized solutions. They promote restrictive eating patterns that certainly don't work in the long term, and in fact can cause much harm. And again, I've explored many of the hidden costs of dieting in earlier podcast episodes. So when it comes to weight loss, be very careful here about what is being promised. And as I just mentioned, check out the earlier episodes of the Eating For You podcast. If you're interested in the research behind weight loss medications, then episode 39 might be a good one to tune into as well. I just wanted to share also my recent experience of checking out something that was being offered on social media. And it was an intermittent fasting quiz. So I entered all of my details that were asked for, and it was quite extensive. And the summary came back was that my eating habits were harmful, that I would be experiencing high levels of hunger, that I was at risk of my weight yo-yoing, and that I was susceptible of gaining weight, especially around my middle. And I knew all of this was totally false. I'm not hungry. I certainly don't have problems with my weight, not now that I eat mindfully. And I just thought, what a load of crock, especially when you get to the final page and you actually have to pay for your plan. It's actually a membership, an online membership that they want you to pay. So not only is it misleading, it is very scaremongering. And I thought, I can work through this situation and assess it as being total rubbish, whereas someone else who's really wanting to invest in their health is going to be frightened not to take action. And I really abhor this type of marketing and messaging. So that was one of my many experiences testing out things on social media. The other area of concern at the moment is the selling of supplements, herbal supplements, vitamin and mineral supplements, and hormone balancing supplements. And I'm really excited to say we'll have an episode coming soon on supplementation, and I'm going to be having a discussion with Grace Hughes, a naturopath. So there can be a lot of emotional manipulation with marketing. And, if you don't take this pill, if you don't weigh yourself, if you don't do, 10,000 steps a day, if you don't fast for 12 hours a day or 18 hours a day, and it really does make you feel quite insecure. And whilst not totally related to health here, there was a very powerful marketing campaign when a new shopping centre opened in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and they had these horrible posters in the lifts, and it was of women shopping with a Pinocchio doll, a wooden doll, sitting on their shoulder telling them what to buy to make them feel better, to look better, to feel more confident. And I thought it was just so blatant and it was so scary. But that's just one example of advertising that you are exposed to. So just be very mindful, start becoming aware of these different influences and how they're making you feel. And if they're not making you feel good, if they're making you feel inadequate, shameful, or overwhelmed, then really notice this and say, I don't need this anymore. And again, putting up my hands to say what a wonderful approach mindfulness and mindful eating can be, because it allows us to sit back and notice these influences on our choices over our food how we feel in ourselves and how we are health-wise from a physical and mental perspective as well, which is really important because we can't be healthy and not happy. That doesn't make sense. So it's finding a way of eating and living that supports both your health and happiness, which is important. So just giving you some tips on how to find a real health expert. Look for the qualifications, find out if they're registered or accredited in their particular area of practice. And recency of practice is really important. Someone can have a PhD, which gives them a doctor title in a field that is totally not related to their area of experience. And just make sure you understand this. I got caught out a few years ago. I was seeing a healthcare practitioner that was recommended by a friend of mine. And this practitioner recommended a particular supplement to help me with my digestion. At different times in my life, my digestion has become a little bit sensitive or irritable. And I took this supplement and it actually worsened my digestion. It gave me constipation. And I would say it took 6 to 8 weeks after stopping that particular supplement that my digestion returned to normal and functioning well. I actually telephoned the company that supplied these supplements to practitioners. They were what was called a practitioner-only brand, so only healthcare practitioners can sell them. But this particular healthcare practitioner had no training in nutrition and no training in herbal medicine. So be very wary when your good-natured healthcare practitioner starts offering you supplements. Just say, yes, thank you. Can I get the details? And I want to do a little bit of research. And certainly check in with your other healthcare practitioners because supplements can interfere with medications and other supplements that have been prescribed to you by people who are actually qualified. So even us healthcare practitioners can get caught out from time to time. So make sure you ask these questions. I know it can be difficult. So if the healthcare practitioner has the qualifications and experience that you're looking for, then they're going to be happy to share that with you. The other thing to watch out for, especially online, is bias. I was reviewing a website recently that said that weight loss surgery, bariatric surgery, was the gold standard for weight loss because it was the only intervention that guaranteed lasting weight loss. And I know for a fact that that's not true. The research evidence is not there. There's actually more research evidence to demonstrate the weight regain after surgery. So be very careful and make sure you get a second opinion, especially if you're investing a lot of money and especially if it involves an operation. Look for personalization of whatever program, treatment, consultation, whatever it is that you're seeking. Make sure it's personalized to your own health and lifestyle requirements. And the other thing is communication. Make sure you can discuss these things with your practitioner. And if you can't, maybe take a friend or family member with you for support, or perhaps that's not the right practitioner for you. And most of all, beware of quick fixes and magic pills. If it sounds too good, as the saying is, it probably is too good to be true. The other barrier is accessing what we like to call holistic care, an approach to care that looks at your lifestyle, who you are as a person, not just your blood test results or your X-ray or imaging results. Too often, healthcare can just focus on the symptoms or those test results. And literally, there can be 1,000 miles between what the test results are saying and how you are living as a person and how you're feeling as a person. So take care to find that healthcare practitioner that you can talk to, someone who has time to listen, even if it means having more consultations, just so you can feel heard. So many clients have said to me, Sally-Ann, it's the first time when it comes to my eating habits, I really feel that I have been listened to and I haven't been judged. And to be in that safe space is so important for you to actually become confident in making choices for your eating and your health. Where we live impacts what services we have available to us. And I shared that earlier about the gap in Australia with access to healthcare services and the higher burden of disease. We don't all have equal access to the same types of services. But the good thing about online services is that we can reach right around the world. And certainly I work with ladies all around Australia and overseas as well. But make sure you go through that checking process, that you know who you're working with, you know what their qualifications and experience is. Don't just go by the testimonials, because that's another big difference between registered healthcare practitioners and those who may have no training or limited training. As registered healthcare practitioners, we cannot share testimonials like, those before and afters. So it's not a level playing field there. So not only do you want to have the guarantee of results, but you have to make sure that you are working with someone who's qualified and had results not just for themselves, but for clients as well. So it's important for yourself to recognize that mind-body connection with your health. And certainly our research into the gut microbiome has really demonstrated that link between mind and body and how there is a two-way communication. And mindfulness and mindful eating is one way that you can strengthen that connection, that awareness of how your choices are impacting on your mind and body. So whilst I believe that we all need access to healthcare practitioners, the aim should be for you to become the expert in your own mind and body so you feel confident making the choices for yourself. So important to get practical step-by-step information that you can test out and implement in your day-to-day life. So important. And looking for online resources, again, make sure they come from a qualified healthcare practitioner. Some examples of the Eating for You resources that are available to you. We have our Eating for You community Facebook group. We have our Mindful Eating and Living Challenge group, and that's where I host our events. There's also blog posts, podcasts, YouTube. I offer that free mindful eating strategy call if you're looking for that longer term solution to your eating that doesn't require a diet or jumping on the scales. There's also the Eating for You book and paid nutrition consultations and programs. And many of the services that I offer are eligible for health insurance rebates in Australia and some eligible for Medicare rebates as well, which is quite timely because it does move on to those economical and social constraints that we face in our healthcare system. And one of them is financial, whether it be a lack of funding that I mentioned earlier for rural areas, or whether it can be the amount of money you have available to spend on your health. But as I said, if you do have health insurance, make sure you're using your allocation to your advantage each year. If finances are tight, look to your public health services and see what you can get there. Or if you're looking for something that is going to be more long-term, look for a payment plan as well. And I certainly offer payment plans and pensioner discounts on my services, and many healthcare practitioners do as well. This one's not going to come as a surprise to you. Women are often juggling multiple roles, and this can lead to us actually having less time for ourselves or believing that we don't have time for our own health and well-being. And this is why in the Eating for You approach, I'm very mindful that everyone's 24 hours looks a bit differently, but we all have the opportunity to carve out some time for ourselves. That's why at the moment I'm wearing my own Medicine Buddha health band just to remind myself to take care of myself, because I've been juggling a few extra roles myself this past 6 months. So at some points of our life, we may have more or less time to invest in our health. But as I often share with my clients, If we don't invest in our own health and well-being, we're not setting a good example for the next generations either. So we have an opportunity to not only take care of ourselves by creating that time for ourselves, but we're demonstrating to our children and our grandchildren that taking care of themselves is important too. Community support cannot be undervalued, and this is what ladies who participate in my events always say. It was great to be sharing with like-minded women, and certainly my small group coaching program is a wonderful place and safe place for women to share their eating and health goals, to listen to each other's stories, to support each other, be motivated by their own success and inspired by the other ladies' progress as well. And we have both the paid coaching available, but also the free Eating for You community. And I'll make sure there's a link to that in this episode's notes. But whatever you decide to do for your health, take small steps, knowing that if you can maintain those, it will lead to big change. So just going back over what we've covered today, the 5 barriers that we have taken a look at are those cultural and societal expectations of women and women's bodies. And if you haven't already, then I really do encourage you to listen to episode 118 on the impact of body image on the choices that we make every day. The medical bias and misinformation has a little way to go. It is good to know that Australia is starting to move forward, like other countries around the world, to make sure both men and women are represented in research studies. But at least as a starting point, you can include that in your discussion with your healthcare practitioners and find out whether the treatments that they are recommending have been tested in women as well as men. The marketing influence and diet culture. Well, that's a biggie, but mindfulness does help us to be aware of it, to recognize the overwhelm that this can cause and the fact that you can step away from it once you know that it's there. But of course, if you're feeling that and need some help with that and it's affecting the way you eat, then join me in one of those free mindful eating strategy calls, and I'll be sharing a link to my calendar with the notes. A lack of access to holistic healthcare has partially been overcome with the availability of online services. But again, whether it's online or face-to-face, make sure you're checking out the qualifications and experience of the health expert that you're seeing. Economics and social constraints needn't be a barrier to you accessing healthcare. Such as the Eating for You community, we do have free resources available. Other organisations do as well. But also consider spending some money on your health is really a very good investment for your future. But again, make sure you're getting the advice that you need. Look for payment plans, and some practitioners like myself also offer a discount to low-income earners. So women's rights are human rights, and this includes the right to personalised nutrition and health guidance. Make sure you reach out to qualified healthcare practitioners, and if you're keen to learn more about the Eating for You approach and how it can improve your health and well-being without a diet or the scales, then make sure you book in for a free mindful eating strategy call today. Please share what you enjoy from this episode. Share the link on your social media pages and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to sharing with you again next week. You have been listening to the Eating for You podcast with Sally-Anne Pisk. If you are looking for additional support to enjoy a lifelong way of healthier eating, then join me in a free 30-minute call to see if our approach is right for you. I have included the link to book an obligation-free call in this episode's